in this lesson here, we're talking about solving integers, but what we're going to do is we're going to start off with taking a look at what are some different types of number systems, and that's going to lead us into integers as well as into rational numbers in just a little bit, and kind of what are rational numbers. So number one, there's a lot of types of numbers, okay, out there. Some are very simple, and that's what we usually start with, and others are more complicated. Okay. Each group of numbers includes the previous one as well, so we kind of build our way up from simple to definitely more complex. And each kind of set of numbers has its own kind of groupings that it goes with. We start off with a system called natural numbers. Now, natural numbers are kind of the numbers that people started with, thousands of years ago and used, and they were the only numbers that they kind of really needed to know, and these are the most basic, and they are numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's all people really needed to know. They just needed to know how many of something did we have, whether it was for trade or whether it was for payment or whether it was for counting days, years, and seasons, and so on and so forth. Okay, so people used really basic types of numbers. Now, a little while later, we needed a number we needed to represent some more numbers, and so we added a number and called it the whole number system. So we took the natural numbers and we added one number. We needed a value, or a value was needed to describe nothing. So we need to describe nothing, and so we used the number 0, or we used what we would call 0. 0 is not technically a number. Okay, 0 is just technically a placeholder. It means nothing. It doesn't actually mean anything, but we use it as a number, and we use it as nothing. So we call this now the whole number system, and it includes all the natural numbers, so again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it now includes 0. So we've added that on there, and so these are what we may consider positive numbers, okay? But in essence, it's really just our natural numbers, the numbers that we use on a regular basis, and then we include 0 in there if we want to say nothing. The next system, and this is the one that we're going to be using in this lesson here, is a system called integers. Okay, and you've probably heard of integers before, and that's a really good thing. But integers were the next step that we went through here. So at first, only positive numbers were used, and then we needed a way to describe negative, then a way to describe negatives was desired. Okay, so negatives again represent anything below 0, and negatives are we use it in numbers. In financial systems, as well as temperature and stuff like that. But a lot of that's based on science that kind of came around a little later on, and science and math work really well together, and we needed to know integers and or negatives. And so integers are all the whole numbers that we had, so 0, 1, 2, 3, but now we're going to go backwards and we're going to start to include all the negatives that are below 0. And so we go from -1 down to -2 down to -3. And remember that negatives are always going lower, even though the numbers keep getting higher. Then we wanted to go beyond integers, and we want to try to get in between each number, and so that's where we came up with what are called rational numbers. Okay, rational numbers. So between each integer are places which needed a description. Okay, we often think of them as decimals. Okay, decimals would be something like 6.1, right? So a decimal. Now, in essence, what that technically is that any value which can be described with a fraction is a rational number, and we'll talk a little more about that in the next lesson. But we've looked at adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing fractions. Okay, those are all what we would call rational numbers. Okay, it includes all the integers, so like 1, 2, 3, -1, 2, 3, as well as all of these kind of fractions as well. So a lot of times we would think of them as being decimals, and it's most decimals. Okay, it includes any decimals which end at some point or are repeating in some manner. Those would all be considered rational numbers. But now there's also some other numbers that don't repeat or they don't end. They never end, they never repeat. And these are really kind of abstract numbers. We're not going to deal with them a whole lot, but I want to go through this system. And this is called the irrational. Okay, based on rational, but irrational. This is the irrational number system. These ones are included in all numbers, which we would call real numbers. And we're not going to get into that right now, but these are kind of a subset off the side. They don't include these ones here. These are what we would consider to be much more complex numbers, which cannot be described as a fraction. Okay, things like the square root of 2. If you punch into your calculator, yeah, it'll end, but it actually doesn't end. It just keeps on going forever and ever and ever. It's kind of a really weird value. Pi never ends, never repeats. These are all what we would consider irrational numbers. And so they're ones that are we can't really explain them with anything else. They don't follow any of our other types of numbering systems. Now for this video here, there are no questions that I want you to do, but I want you to see what are the different numbering systems and how do we kind of catalog certain numbers.